Alright, for the second lesson today, our main objective is to look at energy and matter in ecosystems. So what is energy doing? Where is it going? And how do we show that in science and ecology? So as we move on, we're looking at energy and matter in ecosystems. The first thing we need to do is distinguish between food chains and food webs. I think this diagram does a really good job on the right. So we'll go over the main characteristics of food chains and some of the key things that you're going to have to know for the class. This shows, what does a food chain show? Well, it shows a flow of energy from one trophic level to the next. If you look all the way over here on the far right, where the mouse is, you can see this is the chain. With this food chain right up here, it's just from one organism to one other organism. Typically, we don't really include energy from the sun in a food chain. You can, but that's more of an energy flow diagram. So while I really like this picture, I might have left the sun out of this entirely and started with the producer. So I would kind of look at it from here. But you see, from the dinoflagellates to the copepods to the sunfish to the shark to the small shark to the large shark, right? So we go from primary, secondary, tertiary, quaternary consumers all the way to the top. The web is a more complex web of relationships, which we'll see the difference in a second. The key in both of these is that only 10% of the energy, or approximately 10% of the energy, is passed to the next trophic level. You'll see that it's not always the case. Sometimes less, sometimes more. Where's the rest of the stuff going? What happened to it? It's lost as heat. That's important. Heat or respiration. Those terms are terms we're going to be talking about quite a bit. So food web, how's that different? On the food web, it shows all the possible feeding relationships in a community at each trophic level. This is a network of interconnected food chains. So you should be able to find a bunch of food chains in here. So we'll identify 2 food chains along the way. My other gripe with this food web is that this should be arrows here. So it should be showing energy flowing this direction, right? See what I mean? There's no arrows here, but it should all be moving up. That's the flow of energy from producers on up. So anyway, we can go ahead and draw them in as we go along the way. Let's find one food chain in red here. So there we go, dinoflagellates to shrimp. This shrimp we can follow all the way up to the tuna to the smaller shark, and the smaller shark to the larger shark. So there's one chain there. Can we find the same chains, a different chain starting in the same place? Absolutely. We'll change colors here. Green, dinoflagellates into these copepods. Let's go here. Copepods to the amphipods. And that goes up to the lancetfish, to the marlin, to the shark. There you go. There's one other chain. There's a lot of other variations of chains that we could find here. You should be able to find, 5 or 6 different ones without too much trouble, and there would still be even more than that. So remember, a food web is more complex, shows all possible relationships. All right, that's the key. How do we represent energy in ecosystems, or energy at different trophic levels? There's a couple ways to do this. Energy flow pyramids is one of the most popular ones. They're easy to read and see and understand. Remember that each link in a food chain is known as a trophic level. A lot of times we refer to those levels just as numbers. So here we would just say this is level 1, 2, 3, and 4. And then we also have names: producer, primary consumer, secondary, and tertiary. Trophic levels represent a feeding step in a transfer of energy and matter in an ecosystem, so where that's unfolding. So we'll talk about that. Autotrophs again, and these are our heterotrophs, right? So these are our consumers, and these are our producers down here. Other names: herbivore, carnivore, omnivore, and carnivores are top consumers, like our shark was on the previous page. Energy flow diagram, what I wanted to show you was that all energy is accounted for. We don't lose any energy. Energy is not being created or destroyed. It's just changing form, so remember that. So energy changes forms. So it changes form. So what does that look like? Here we start with, in this box, and I'll switch to green because that's what they use, that we had 200 joules of energy to begin with, right? So that energy is being consumed by this caterpillar. What does the caterpillar do with that energy? Well, 100 joules of it, so we're talking about half of the energy that it eats, is feces. It just poops it out the other end. It can't use it. It's gone. Okay, so that energy is accounted for here. So we have some energy, 100 joules worth, going out here in this direction as fecal loss. Then, as we move on, we're going to change the color here, red for respiration. This energy here, 67 joules worth, is going off in this other direction as cellular respiration. So we can show this off as heat. This energy is being eliminated off in that direction. So what does the caterpillar actually get to keep for itself to grow nice and big and fat? What actually stays with the caterpillar? Well, this has been pooped out the back end. Over here, this has been given off in the form of heat energy, so that's gone. So what does it actually get to keep? Well, all it actually gets to keep inside itself is this 33 joules of energy for growth and development. What this is representing is this 33 out of this 200 is all that it actually gets to do. So we know that this energy, this is following approximately the 10% rule right here. Now, is it 10%? No. If it were 10%, it would be 20 joules. It's getting a little bit more than 10%, but that's okay. This is roughly, this is just an approximation, but this is approximately our 10% rule demonstrated right there. That's the energy that is available to the next trophic level. So think about it. The caterpillar keeps this energy for growth and development, gets nice and big and fat, and when a bird flies down to eat it, it's going to get only approximately 10% of all this stuff. The bird can't eat this or this, so it's going to have to take what the caterpillar stored in it and move on. Ecological pyramids, like I said, a way to demonstrate energy at each trophic level. A nice graphic for us. Shows we have three that we're going to talk about with pyramid of energy. Shows available energy from all organisms at each trophic level. So we just lump them all together. It's not just this type of flower. This is all plants in this ecosystem. All right. So it's measured in joules or kilojoules, depending on how much energy we're talking about. And again, I can't harp on this enough. 10% rule. The idea of 10% is passed, or approximately, to the next level. Pyramid of numbers. Same type of relationship. This shows the actual number of organisms at each trophic level. This can be inverted with producers that are large in size. This one is not the case because aquatic plants are typically very small. However, if we had a forest ecosystem with like huge redwood trees, we might see something like this, where we have a small base of producers, and then we have larger and larger. And it doesn't have to be exactly like that, but this could be smaller because maybe there's like 10 redwood trees in our forest, which is really small, and there's like 1,000 different insects here that are feeding on this redwood tree. The tree itself is very large and can accommodate a lot of different species living on it, versus something like aquatic plants, which are small, so there's going to be more of them. Next up, we see ecological pyramids, and these are called pyramids of biomass. Again, with the units, just look at the units. If it's just a number with no unit, then we know it's a pyramid of numbers. If it's got the joules or the J in it, it's a pyramid of energy. And if it's got grams anywhere in there, you see a G, that's biomass. That's the dry weight. Water's removed because it's abiotic, it's not living. We only want living matter. Right? How much living matter? That's it at each trophic level. That's what they're looking for with pyramid of biomass. Usually similar to pyramid of energy in shape and size. Talking about how things move up through food chains, we also see this unique relationship occur with toxins and the bad things that are in the environment sometimes. So we see this in these two terms, and there's a difference. They're very similar. Bioaccumulation and biomagnification. Accumulation something accumulates, it builds up in the individual, and this is going to be the key here, is the individual. So if you were exposed to a toxin in your life, it would build up in your tissues over your lifespan. Biomagnification is the process of an increase in toxins at high trophic levels. So the ones that are most likely to experience the highest concentrations of toxins are the things up at the top. And the reason for that is at this level of producers, we have accumulation of toxins. So let's just say we have these red, and you can see the red dots in there too a little bit, but there's some toxin in these red dots. Okay, the producers get them. Now, the energy from the producers goes here. They feed on the zooplankton, take the energy from the producers, right? It's just like a food chain. Well, what happens? They take the energy, but they also take the toxins. So now, these guys had toxins coming in from their environment, just like the producers did, but they're also feeding on things with toxins, so they get more. These guys, these small fish, have toxins coming in from the environment, and they're getting it from here too, so they're hitting it multiple ways. Same thing here, moving up, and then here. So what's happening is the toxin concentration is building as we move up. Energy and matter, it's important to follow them through ecosystems. So what we're looking at really is nutrient cycles, and energy flows through ecosystems. Remember, it can't be reused. Energy is flowing and matter is cycling. If you remember one thing, that would be the key. Matter cycles, energy flows. So energy is going to move from start to finish, and matter is going to cycle around. Cycling of matter in ecosystems maintains the homeostasis. We talked about that with organisms. Now we're talking, or living things, characteristics of life. Now we're talking about that in our environment, the overall ecosystem. 3 cycles that we're going to investigate. We have water cycle, carbon cycle, and nitrogen cycle. Water cycle. We'll go over a lot of this stuff in class and some of these key terms. These are the things that I really want you to know. Evaporation, transpiration, condensation, precipitation. These processes are occurring in our water cycle all the way through. Okay, so this allows matter to cycle. What is water? This is matter. That's why this is happening in our cycles here. Okay. Do we need energy to drive this process? Yes. The energy that's driving this process is our sunlight. So energy and matter working together. The carbon cycle we'll identify more in class as well. I will tell you that you need to know the inputs and outputs of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. Something to highlight is that this, we'll put a box of in yellow here, photosynthesis, and then in red, respiration. What I want you to see is that they're just the reverse of each other, right? So if I just took this side and flipped it on this side of the arrow, and this side and flipped it on this side of the arrow, now I'd have cellular respiration. So you really only need to know it one way. What's it showing you? It's showing a carbon cycle, carbon and oxygen cycle through the environment. Carbon dioxide is a key component of that. So if you look at this diagram, you'll have to know this pretty well. But we're showing respiration, and how CO2 basically comes out of the atmosphere, or given into the atmosphere and then taken out of the atmosphere. So if you look at this, how does CO2? Well, it comes out of this wolf through the process of respiration, decomposition, or bacteria in the soil will give off CO2 up there. This wolf, like we said, is going through respiration. Some CO2 is given off from water sources, so that's a carbon store in the atmosphere here. How is it fixed? How is it taken into something? Well, photosynthesis takes that into the tree, and the tree uses that to grow and develop through that process right there. And then we see these other organisms can also decompose. They store carbon in their body from this feeding relationship here. So the plant's into this bunny. The bunny dies and this carbon decomposes. So we'll talk about it a little bit more depth in class, but definitely wanted you to be exposed to this process. And finally, the nitrogen cycle. This is probably the most difficult one, following nitrogen through an ecosystem. Just know that when you're looking at these, it probably makes a lot of sense just to start with atmospheric nitrogen and then see where it goes from there. Nitrogen makes up nearly 80% of the air in the atmosphere. Most organisms can't really use it in that form, so they have to fix it into a different form. Lightning can do that as well. Nitrogen fixation occurs. We take N2 and convert it to ammonium, which can be used as well. So you can see this process that the bacteria can fix this nitrogen into the soil. So we see that happen in two different places, and that process can occur straight from the atmosphere into the soil. We convert ammonium into nitrates and then nitrites and then nitrates. So nitrates or nitrites and then nitrates, and then those nitrates are utilized by plants through the process of assimilation. That nitrogen is then moved up the food chain by these animals that are eating the plants, and we see this occur. We also see something kind of kooky happen here. We have denitrification, so we take the nitrates and convert them back into NO2. So that's another way to get that back into the atmosphere as well. All right, so we see this kind of cycle unfold, but it's really nitrogen in the atmosphere is N2 being converted into nitrites, ammonium, nitrites, and nitrates, which are then utilized by plants and animals in the food chain.